Hello and welcome to the Connected Mindset. I'm your host, Greg Tomczyk, and each week we bring you the stories and strategies to help connect you to your wildest dreams. Today's episode is presented by Valor Cybersecurity, simplified cybersecurity solutions for your business. Today's guest is no stranger to mindset and connection. Eric Infanti is a 7-time author, Marine veteran, and today helps improve and bring mindfulness to the digital experiences that we all enjoy on a daily basis. So without further ado, let's give Eric a huge welcome to the show and let's dive in. Eric Infanti, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you today?
Oh, Greg, I'm doing super great. Thank you very much for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Looking forward to diving right in here. One of the things that's amazing about these episodes is being able to prepare, learn a little bit more about yourself, how you've evolved throughout your different experiences. Had the chance to check out Marine on the Mat recently, both in audio as well as in print format. Incredible book. One of the core themes that I got from that book was around transition. We're all going through transitions, whether it's in work, in life, and everything in between. And one of the things I want to start off by discussing is kind of anything you've seen that help people kind of better navigate transition, whether it's in their personal or professional lives.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to go into with this topic, and like you said, we're always in a transition, and so acceptance of that is the first thing. We have a consistency of change that's happening, and that's inside of ourselves, and then our micro families, and then broadening that out to bigger circles, and then taking a macro 30,000 foot view of what's going on globally as well. There's a lot of transitions in the world right now. So.
Absolutely. Any mindsets that kind of helped you, and we'll dive in a little bit to the book and, kind of what brought you to that point. But it's taking those commonalities from being a Marine and then what's going to help you use those lessons to navigate, your life going forward. Any kind of key lessons that you were hoping to communicate through that book that have kind of carried out, in the transitions after you delivered and published it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that book is a teaching story, and it parallels the Marine Corps boot camp experience, pretty detailed, um, as well as the life of someone on a spiritual path. So, I've been through all of those journeys that people go through along both of those paths, like train rails, in a single trajectory. But what I have found is, if we're going into our center, our core, which means coming into a very still space, that is going to be a key thing. So we can call it mindfulness, we can call it meditation, we can call it as we wish. And how we get there can be an unlimited amount of ways, an unlimited amount of avenues. Of course, we want to do it ethical, moral, and safe, and not necessarily have substances to bring us there. But we want to get ourselves into our core, our center, and do that in a harmonious way so we can start to look into ourselves a little bit deeper than we normally would in daily conscious living. So we want to come into an other than normal consciousness state, which is a still state. And we can get that through the meditative experiences, and there's a lot of them to go through. So.
Oh yeah. What is it? Is it 8 limbs?
Well, that's the 8 limbs of just yoga, but there's a lot of spiritual paths. This is just the yogic path.
Right.
There's many that I've been involved in, many I've been trained for, many I've been practicing for a very long time. But yoga has these 8 paths, pretty well defined. Codified by that person we call Patanjali. We don't know who that person is, but we say that he codified and brought all this doctrine together in one unified space. Called the 8 limbs of yoga. And as we can see that trajectory as well, just like Marine Corps boot camp gives you a pathway. Well, so does the 8 limbs of yoga. It gives you a spiritual pathway, and it brings you right to that space that I'm speaking of, that still space, that center point.
Absolutely. Yeah. We talk about it, kind of in the same light, but we call it connecting to the source. We're all navigating these different changes going on, and most of the time it's uncontrollables. So if you can kind of have that, bring yourself back down to earth, whether it's breathing mindfully or, thinking about a 5-second rule where you count to 5. I know Mel Robbins is big into that. Anything that you've seen, on the military side, that kind of has a similar theme to it? Do they teach you things like that when things get hectic? Is that what kind of started, that mindset within you to say, after I, get out of the Marines, I want to find a deeper way to connect to this source or connect to this center in your own life?
Absolutely. So back when I was serving in the Marines, and that's early '90s when I got out. So there was nothing provided, given, or even mentioned in that regard. Now, a lot of us know today that resiliency training is being offered somewhere, um, but it's not going to be enough. It's not going to be what people need, especially in a transition out of the military into back into civilian life. It's an enormous change. I mean, you've lost your work, you've lost your work family, you've lost the people you live with, eat with, serve with, train with every single day. And people have your back. You know that, you feel that, you experience that, and then you come out into the civilian world where that's all taken from you by choice, usually, to get out. But you know, the biggest thing is to go after this on your own and take that initiative, right? And so instead of dealing with the acute micro traumas that we do on a single basis every single day, um, and then even the macro ones that are going to be more traumatic, this is something to integrate into our daily lives. And so the thing is find what works for you, what resonates for you, and then go down that path. There's a lot of ways to skin this, and it could be well beyond the yogic practice, but that's a primary one that I do. And the conscious breathing, the pranayamas, if you would, the Sanskrit word for conscious breathing, um, is that. And that's the gateway for me into that still space. Conscious breathing is kind of getting popularized these days in a lot of different ways. You mentioned it even earlier without me saying anything. So um, practicing that into a still space, or getting some movement in. You could be in a CrossFit gym and just sit down in the gym afterwards for 10 minutes and don't do anything and leave your phone alone. That's perfect. Just sit in stillness for a little bit and see what arises.
Yeah, I think a lot of us think of, mindfulness as just stillness. And, I think a lot of times, and you hit on it perfectly. It's, for you, mindfulness is through movement as well. And you find that kind of center through your yoga practice and the movement you go through. I went through a similar transition when I was getting out of baseball, and you become kind of lost for, 6 months, a year,
Sure.
2 years, some even longer. But you seek information and you seek answers, through books, through asking people questions. And what I realized was, until I started to put these things into practice that I was being taught, that I was reading about,
Yep.
it wasn't really impacting my life as much. And I think a lot of us want information to solve our issues and solve our problems, but at the end of the day, you have to put things into practice. And one of the key things you hit on was around movement and kind of creating momentum, in a direction, which kind of can help bring you back, to center. What do you think from a movement standpoint? It comes in so many different facets, and I know you've been big into yoga. You've done some CrossFit certifications as well, and kind of went through different modalities, that multimodality model of movement. How important do you think movement is to somebody's day to day?
I mean, it's absolutely critical. I mean, the first thing is we want the physical, body, the physical machine to be primed as best as we can do that. We want to eat proper and get away from the false persona of the FDA's, food pyramid, and we want to be smarter than that, and then find a movement thing that you love. You had baseball, I had Brazilian jiu-jitsu, for 21 years now. Finally, black belt comes,
Awesome.
but even that discipline, when you're live rolling, when you're sparring live, that is an absolute meditation. There's no thoughts. You better know what you're doing, but there's no thought in that, and so you're absolutely in a movement meditation. It's no different than you call it Tai Chi, Jiu-Jitsu. It just doesn't matter, except for the dynamic force of it all, right? But any athletic movement or functional movement, if you're not doing athletic movement, fine. Well, I'm hurt here, or I'm a certain age, or this ailment isn't working for me. So, functional movement just is fine. But we want to get the heart rate to elevate, get all our systems primed. And this is part of the pathway. I used to go on 35, 50-mile bike rides when I was training for the Ironman back in, early 2020, before the whole thing came, right? And took that away. But I used to go on long bike rides, and I would set up my environment where I could be sweaty and still lie down somewhere, and then go right into breath work, and then right to meditation. So find your jam, but after that's over, sit down, lie down, breathe, and then silence. It's simple. I like my Viking, type of my tools, my steel mace, my kettlebells, and things like that to work out with, and then find a little bit of stretching right there. I'm talking 2, 3, 5 minutes. That's it. Go into conscious breath work, and then go into stillness from there. Lie down, sit down, close your eyes, relax, no phone. Simple.
Yeah, all this stuff is so applicable, I think, to just how we navigate, life in general. When you talk about, you're sprinting into, one task or one objective, and then you take that break, and just finding ways in between those different, transitions of objectives, but, finding, the center in it, but also being able to navigate and connect with people. I think sometimes we go so deep inside that we kind of cut off, the outside world when we're doing something that we love. We're kind of in our flow state or in our genius zone. And I think, some people are always seeking that, trying to find that passion that's going to get them in that zone. But what do you think? I always kind of think about how to try to find a balance between the two. You're doing something you love, you're super hyper focused, but you also don't want to lose connection, with the outside world. Any ways you've seen or seen folks around you kind of do that in a optimal way?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a great point, because we want to foster connection as deeply as we can with as many people as we can, especially in the day to day, right? So we've been taught a lot of lessons from 2020 onward, and we know that our human connection to ourselves, to each other, globally even, and also to this planet, and all of our friends who are animals here. We want, and we need, and we thrive with that connection. So here's what I have noticed, though. When people go into some of these states of consciousness, other than normal states of consciousness, they're replacing a different dopamine high with this, and they're not using it to get to that center point for optimal living. They're just doing it for a quick dopamine high, right? Oxytocin, and so we're still on the wrong path, right? We're just doing this instead, and then maybe labeling it, and then now we look cool, we sound cool, and we wear a mallow around our wrist, and we even, we have the fashion of it too now, right? So, the biggest thing I can suggest here is, one, do it for the right reason. Be real with yourselves, right? and then do it so we're better connected to ourselves, and therefore we can be a better human out in the greater world. So that's one. But the second part to answer this is do it with someone you care about and create that connection there, and then you have a little bit of accountability, a little check and balance. Um, and you can go deeper into the relationship of whoever that is, whether it's your daughter, your mother, your spouse, your friends. I've taught this countless times over Zoom, and it's amazing how we can create a community connection with technology with people all over the world, right? The resonance is truly there. So those 2 points I'd like to drive home hard to answer that question for you.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, it's limitless bounds to connection nowadays with the internet.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we created this show is because there's multi ways to connect, right? We're connecting to people, we're connecting to ideas, to stories, to the internet, and that kind of makes ideas go at a wider reach from that standpoint, which I think is great. But I think at this time, people feel less connected because they're so connected. So it's kind of being able to kind of choose which connections you're making and how you're making them. I think a lot of that comes from the mindset you're bringing to the day to day. Folks talk a lot about the best things in life aren't free, but I think connecting to yourself is really the most costly thing you could not do, if that makes sense. And you hit on that point extremely well. And I think our bodies, and this is one of the big kind of enlightenments I've had recently, or breakthroughs, is our bodies are almost like chemistry projects where these chemicals of dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin, things of that nature, are going up and down all day, most of the time unconsciously. I didn't really learn it in baseball. I wish somebody would have said, "Hey, when you're on the mound, here's the chemical going up. Here's how you can kind of think about bringing that down or bringing that up to perform better. When you're not performing, here's some things you can do to kind of make sure your chemicals are regulated so your body's recovering, kind of all that good stuff." It was kind of done more ad hoc. But as I've kind of learned, my own body and done some research on it, heard some of the great researchers and medical folks, I've kind of learned that chemistry project in my own body. I'm still learning it as I go forward. But I think a lot of people don't hear enough about it, right? We hear a lot about, stress levels. We hear a lot about anxiety, things of that nature, substance abuse, and people, are always chasing something, some feeling that they may never achieve from that standpoint. So anything that you've seen from that chemistry project internally, or those chemicals that really impact the way that we navigate life, that kind of stick out to you that the audience could benefit from?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll reference another more famous podcaster than myself, um, Huberman. So Andrew Huberman, he is he's well known. He is pretty genius from my point of view, but he also has the credibility and the knowledge and the experience. So he talks about these topics in great detail. His podcasts and video podcasts are long in duration. They are huge. They are 90-minute, 2 hours, 2.5 hours long. So if you have that kind of time and bandwidth, go ahead and listen to him in detail. But the things he might say would be exactly what I said earlier. Is a lot of us are still chasing that dopamine high, right? But what we want to do is mitigate that and go into a serotonin, which is more like the different, a simplification of an explanation is the difference between high test coffee, caffeined out, they even advertise it. We got the highest caffeine coffee. A lot of them advertise that, right? So, in contrast to a green tea, which is more of an even keel, right? So, we want to do things that bring us into, Western word homeostasis, Eastern words, harmony, state of balance, equanimity, feeling peace from the inside out. Those are the things we want to foster.
When you were doing your travels, kind of Eastern culture, and kind of thinking about how that compared to a lot of the things that you grew up in within the Western culture, anything from that chemical side that you saw as a huge difference, whether it was what people were putting in their body. Obviously, mindfulness is huge in the experience that you had, and trying to connect, mind, body, spirit. Obviously, the mind is huge in that, making sure you're full mind, full heart. But when it came to kind of that, getting those serotonin levels up through what was putting in your body, or what you were putting in your body, or others around you, were there any themes that you saw related to that aspect?
So the East has a lot to offer. It does. And it's very often a 360 to our Western views. You know, you can talk to someone who's in India as an example, or you practice yoga, and they chant all day long, right? And we would think that that's crazy because that's a huge waste of time, right? They chant all day long, right? So that's their practice, and that's certainly not a lifestyle I'm gonna, be in or promote or advise anyone here either, but when we practice, yoga, we're doing for the mental, the physical, and the spiritual connectivity between the three to cultivate one, supreme human being that doesn't have to chant all day long, you know, to get to the exact space that these Eastern, quote unquote gurus, if you would, right? Which is comical to on the other hand, they bring us a lot of wisdom, the ancient knowledge, right? America is 200 plus years old, and let's just face it, right? So the United States that we call it, um, but the Indian and the Chinese doctrines are ancient. They're thousands of years old, right? So they bring a lot of wisdom, but we have to translate across an ocean. We have to go from Sanskrit or Pali Canon, written in foreign languages, into a year of 2023, right? So, how do we deal with that, right? And then how do we bring it into our lives in a way that's not overwhelming but benefiting? So we have to find again the spiritual practices that work for us, and what are they? And sometimes that's a very long discovery. Sometimes it's, oh, I hit it right off. I've tried everything. Trust me, I've been around, figuratively around the globe to discover everything that's out there. And I found the things that work best for me, and those are the things that I continue to practice and teach every single day. Um, but the marriage between the East and the West is the most critical part. How do we weave that, right? How do we put those Ethernet cables together, right? And then put that into play, So for us, it's time chunking. That's how we do that. So you say take the break, and you're right. We could take 5 minutes, but what if we can just take 30 minutes 3 times a day and put the phone away? Go on a walk with your dog with no phone. Try that out for size, right? That jars a lot of people. No phone for 30 minutes. That's crazy talk, right? But how many distractions and pings come out of that phone, right? Besides the stuff we're going to go look at and we're going to initiate, we're dinged constantly. So it's almost like a micro trauma all day long, right? That's what happens, And I remember I was teaching mindfulness on stage, 200 people, microphone, the whole thing, right? But the demographic was 70 years old on up, 80 years old, 90 years old. And somehow we got into the topic. And then I asked them the question, how many of you go to bed and sleep with your phone an arm's distance away from you? Not one hand rose, But underneath that age group, it's crazy talk not to think we're not going to have our phone right next to us, right? Because we're going to go to Instagram or something as the last thing we do at night and the first thing we do when we wake up, right? So that's our human behavior these days. Instead of journaling, instead of breathing, instead of yoga or connecting with your person, if you have one next to you, right? So it's a way to bring the East and the West together, and then how to time chunk that into our lives, because we're all busy, and that's not going to go away. We have this elusive thing about time in our life, we're busy. Well, we also choose that. We also choose that. None of us work 24/7, right? You get up early, right? You get up early to do your thing. You have two little ones. How does that work for you? You look pretty refreshed to me. I mean, so it's working for you, right? So, you don't have like crazy eyes or, bloodshot and all that. I mean, you find a way and you take the excuses out of yourself. That's what we do.
Hmm.
And stop being in this victim mentality that I don't have time, because you can't put time in your hand. You can't hold it. You can't put time in the palm of your hand. This I've preached for years. Time is just simply a continuum in which we place the events in our lives on a daily basis. And what we choose to put on that timeline is ours primarily, right? Primarily. So, and we're not going to carve the time out for ourselves, really. On the other hand, the gurus of the other side, they're doing it all day long. So that's still not productive as a human being in my eyes. When I was in India, I met the cave guy. So in Mysore, India, he's pretty famous. He's in the coffee table books, right? So I'm not making this up. He literally lives in a cave. I went into it. When I was there, I got to meet the cave guy, and I had a conversation with him. What do you do? Meditate. Why? To meditate. That's his answer all day long. I said, what are your biggest obstacles? I'm looking for tips, right? I'm looking for, give me the golden nugget here. I said, what are your obstacles in meditation? He goes, when Westerners like you come and visit me and interrupt. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. He says, no problem. But what's the purpose of that? I don't know. And he obviously didn't know either. But something in him said, well, I got to go meditate all day long and forever. Why? It makes no sense. And he didn't have a cell phone bill, so he doesn't have our Western way of living problems or circumstances or way of life. Without a cell phone bill, right? The community feeds him. Obviously, there's fruit at his doorstep. So time chunking and making this a priority is part of our self love and what makes us a better human.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And, one of the conundrums is, because we have the cell phone, we have a cell phone bill. That means we may have to do something that we don't love in order to pay that bill. And I think that puts people, a lot of people in the back seat as opposed to the front seat of their own life, where they're consciously shaping those mindsets, those things that typically get put on us as kids. You have to go to college, work a 9 to 5, retire at 65 and have your 401k, and that's success. But I think that model is changing, over time from that standpoint. But from the caveman standpoint, what do you think he was trying to separate himself, or he was trying to be more connected to kind of the environment that he was a part of through his kind of meditation, from what you learned from what he told you?
Yeah, I don't think either was his posturing there. I
Mhm.
think it's just naiveness and also listening to another human being, guru, to do what he's going to do all day long with the rest of his life. And so there's a lack of discernment. You know? So that's my view. And that happens a lot. We get into this guru ideation, right? And and unfortunately, um, there is that. But fortunately, they also taught us a lot of wonderful things. So it's it's a little bit of a paradox in my eyes. Um, First of all, the only guru we have is the one that's in our hearts and in our souls, in our consciousness, and that's it. If someone was to say to me, all right, you really need to go do this breath work for 14, 15 hours a day, and that's it. Um, I just kind of look at them with a tilted head and say, get away, because that's a dangerous person in my eyes. Because look at the situations around Bikram, for example, who who's one of those yoga gurus who taught a lot of people a wonderful modality, um, but didn't do it with the right intentions. And he was idolized by so many Western people, and he did horrible things to a lot of them. Right. So this ideation of we're going to have this person that we look up to like that, without ourselves coming first. without our families coming first, without our community coming first, our mission, our purpose, even our job, our work, what we're here for. We need those discoveries and not necessarily listening to another human being instruct us as to what our path needs or should be. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done Bikram a couple of times, and it's that continuous, repetition of the same movement, right? And I think, you bring a different state, to each time that you're practicing.
Yep.
But to me, life changes, right? The environment you go into, maybe something moved, or something changed, or the weather's different. So making sure that's kind of a baseline of operations of those changes are going to take place. You have to be internally resilient and strong in order to navigate that. And you hit on a key point around getting yourself to that first enlightenment point, second enlightenment point, where you start to realize some of these things and become more conscious as opposed to just doing things unconsciously. What do you think gets people there? Is it pain? Is it going through trauma, and then you're like, oh well, I need to start practicing more? Like, do we have to go through the hard times in order to have the enlightenment, in order to have those practices? Or do you think there's other ways to kind of help people connect to the information, but also be able to practice it? And like we mentioned earlier, if you don't put it into practice, it doesn't really ring the bell or set off the light bulb from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and you hit two very important things here, because a lot of people don't take ownership of their being or their health until there's a health crisis, right? And even with that, people still don't move the needle on their own, right? I have a health crisis, one more micro health crisis, I'm in the hospital, but I'm not going to take ownership of this, right? I'm going to find another pill or another doctor or another whatever, or another part of that food pyramid's got to help, So we're gonna stay in that mindset, unfortunately, for some of us. But for those with the insight and the drive and the will, um, it still takes a health crisis to get us to that point, right? But for those who don't, great, you have more utopia than the rest. If you're not going through major traumas and you're finding a spiritual path, beautiful, good for you. Good for you. That's great. That's beautiful. But for those who do have major traumas and or a lot of medium-sized ones, or macro to majors that we just can't handle, and so it brings upon us, right, uh, the anxieties or the PTS, the symptoms, the symptomology, where now our life is disturbed, right? Now we can't be a full moral human because we're distracted by pain, we're distracted by this, or we're distracted by something else, right? So we have to double down is what it is, and figure out what to do to marry East and West together. But without these practices, it's gonna be a road that I wouldn't want to travel down again. Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
No, no, thank you. I mean, we're going to go through stuff, absolutely, and those we find some big lessons in. But how much of it just isn't necessary? Pain from the inside out or from the external world. How much is unnecessary? Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I've always, kind of looked at the East and West, and this is kind of a more general statement, but, West is kind of that is more reactive, at least at this time, this state that we're in today's world. The East is more proactive, and we go through this same, I call it a conundrum or a, mental model within the technology and cybersecurity space, because if people wait till it's too late, oftentimes bad things happen, and then like, oh crap, I wish I would have done that.
That's right.
How do we get people, mentally? I think, health, business, action, around, movement, how do we kind of shift this? And you mentioned earlier, like connecting the Ethernet between the East and the West. And I think that's so fascinating because, it's technology has connected them, but is it really a two-way street back and forth, or is it just us, the West taken from the East and trying to adopt those models? But then you have all those generational models that are already in place. That's very reactive. It's sick care in the healthcare space. It's waiting till we have a heart attack or something traumatic to actually say, hey, I'm gonna start exercising and treating my body right, and thinking about my time model differently, right? It's not work 21 hours a day because that's what I feel like I have to do to make myself happy, and then I have 3 hours to kind of drink water and sleep.
That's right.
So
That's right.
anything, is that kind of how you look at it, proactive, reactive, between the two, or any discoveries there?
Yeah, and I think as a generalist statement, that's absolutely true. Um, but at the same time, let's just take for a moment here and just take a look at what East is. When I was in India, I was shocked because India doesn't practice yoga. They've lost their lineages, right? And that's India's problem. And when I was there for 7 weeks, I was 6 weeks living with an Indian family. I had my own room. So I lived this very Indian lifestyle. They fed me for the holidays, gratefully. Somehow there's a holiday every other day there. I don't know how that works, but I got these great meals on these big palm leaves with no silverware, right? So I was grateful that they have a lot of holidays, but I saw how they live, and they live very simple lives, very normal, simple lives. Some are worse than simple, right? And that's just their daily life, right? They don't have air. A lot of them don't have air conditioning. It's hot, in some areas. It was 110 when I was there with no air conditioning. And then at night, the family would sit at the edge of the driveway, and I would ask them later on, like, why were you all sitting there at the edge of the driveway? They said they were waiting for the evening cool breeze. That's it. But they were peaceful. They were together. They were silent. They were just together. It was kind of a sweet thing to witness. No phones. No one's on TikTok. They're just sitting there together and quietly observing the cool breeze. That's it. What a beautiful thing, right? But these Eastern cultures have lost their own lineages. So that's one thing. So when we say East, I'm going to refer to more of the doctrines then and the practices that they've given us, and not necessarily the cultures of the peoples of these days, right? So, so that's one point I want to bring home there. It's important to understand that at this time of our lives, right? And then we as Western people, we've taken a lot of these modalities, we've taken a lot of these practices, and for the most part, we've done really great things with them, and we've integrated into other things, fitness, life, whatever, right? So we've been able to do that. I can't imagine baseball without mobility drills, before, during, and after, right? So you're gonna have that these days, Pro athletes have personal trainers and PT and massage therapists travel with them. It's just what it is now, right? So we have grown to understand that prehab is more critical than rehab, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, putting that Ethernet cable together is going to be important. So we have to go on a discovery. We just have to, and we have to figure out what works for us, because our parents don't know. They just don't know. Our school systems don't know. Our Western medical practitioners certainly don't know. Right? They don't know. They don't know how to put this together. They're not doing it for themselves. So how can they preach it? So we have to discover, and that could be simple, right? We have YouTube galore. We have all kinds of things. Be careful, please. But we have ways to research these days that we didn't in the past. And so going to find a teacher is the first thing. We need to have mentors, coaches, and teachers in our lives to bring us into this path, and hopefully they're moral, ethical, and upstanding. But then you find a way to work that into your life. We have to weave it in. We have to weave it in on a consistent basis, or there's nothing there. I used to go on retreats very often. Long weekends, week long. Those meditation retreats, the silent ones, the yoga ones, this, that, and the other thing. I mean, umpteen zillion certifications at this point, right? So, and those are like the big moves to give me that depth that I was looking for, as well as the knowledge, but without bringing this into the home every single day and figuring out how to weave that in, you know, that's the thing we need to do. So we have to take control of our time, like we talked about already, and time chunk this in. Well, I'm busy, I'm stressed,
Yeah.
Um, how you gonna get unbusy or unstressed without doing something about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be a shift, and you know, and you have to take responsibility, accountability for that shift. We don't know what we don't know, and I think recognizing that first and foremost, and then having the ability to seek and try to discover
Yep.
those mental models, those aspects, I think are critical. But throughout generations, we keep repeating, some of the same things, right? Whether it's our health, whether it's how we're connecting, some of the mindsets that generations have had and have not documented for that next generation. That's I've made it a point since I kind of had that light bulb go off, like try to write things down, and hopefully that gets put in front of somebody. That's why we publish books.
Yes.
And I know you put out 7, and within your dedication, it was to your son, right? And it was around kind of, no matter what happens, it won't change the bond and connection that we have. And you wrote about that, but that book, it's never going to go anywhere, right? It's going to be accessible for generations to come. Whether it's cousins or third order effect families, or these people can take these and say, this person's ideas live on. And I think that does not happen enough. And it doesn't have to be a published book, right? It doesn't have to be something formalized going through a publisher.
It's
It
true.
can simply be a letter, written to future generations that says, here's 10 things I've learned. The first one is, take care of your health because here's what I experienced. So trying to kind of bring people to that enlightenment before they have to go through that pain is something that I still kind of jumble with and bounce the basketball around. Like, why is this not sticking? And I've been a victim of it as well, or I've been a culprit where I've let myself not learn from somebody until I get burned, and then I'm like, he told me I should have done it this way. And it goes back to kind of that, it's that enlightenment, and then it's that time chunking that you're talking about, where you can kind of start to be a little bit more in control of your time, as opposed to just saying I'm busy, and then you're bouncing off all the different information sources, all the different walls. And I think mindset is so key to that. And then kind of connecting, like we said earlier, kind of to the breath, to the source, whatever that may mean for you. I think for business people, sometimes that's like a meeting at the middle of the day, and they're kind of connecting with the organization of it. But I think a majority of us are just kind of, we're going on our path. We're very focused on that. And nothing kind of gets into the peripherals, because I think technology contributes to that a little bit. It obviously helps us be more connected to information, but I feel like it's making us more unconnected, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to create this show, is try to connect to those stories and strategies that can help people be better connected, both to themselves, but also to the ideas and to others that are going to help them find these enlightenments. So it's a lot of parallels here. I think we can go down a lot of different avenues. But any kind of mindsets for you that have kind of made all the difference? You've written books. You've gone on different journeys. You've played in the technology space for years. You've helped studios develop their businesses. Obviously, you learn a lot from that. Any kind of mindsets you've seen stick out in successful businesses, leaders, individuals that really kind of resonate with you, and you feel the audience kind of needs to hear today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key word that you and I've been speaking of in the past, as well as this morning, is resiliency. And if we can bring that that into our daily life, then I think we're going to be much better human beings as for ourselves, as far as those around us. Because if we stay inside of a victim mindset, even in a sliver, it's going to bring us down, and then all our symptomology is going to show up. All our fatigue is going to show up. All our inner critics are going to show up, right? And then we're going to go into that history of memory. We're going to go backwards. Oh, this was because this. And then we start going into these mental rabbit holes, right? And this is what I can imagine, what people wake up with or go to bed with when the phones are not with us at that point, and what keeps us up at night, So if these are the things swirling around in our heads, then we have to mitigate that, And it's not just one, and it's not one thing. Oh, go practice yoga, or go work out at the gym, or go do a thing, because that could be a lot of things for a lot of different people. I like my things, you like your things, So the best thing about that is we found our things, and that's what works for us. I can't imagine, not that it's often like it used to be, but I can't imagine not putting on a jujitsu gi and going, showing up to class, and being with that camaraderie of people, which I love. That's a small world as well. And rolling live, of course, we're going to learn, drill, warm up, do all those things that we're going to do in a class. But, there's something about slapping five and knuckle bumping and going, and we're not trying to hurt ourselves or each other, but we are certainly trying to win, and so we want to have that mentality in everything that we do. We want to slap five with and knuckle bump everything that we do and move forward to win. And I think that's part of our Western culture, and I think that's a huge thing. The Eastern philosophies don't necessarily point that out too well, right? Human will is not pointed out too well inside of all this doctrine. It's about everything else, but they don't have a whole lot written about the human will, right? In our Western cultures, we have a whole lot of that. I mean, look at United States, 200 years old, 200 whatever years old. And bam, how can you? What do we attribute to that? Human will is what we attribute to that. And constant innovation, right? I'm constantly evolving myself every single day. Every single day, I'm looking at something new, purposefully, right? Not the information, terror that you spoke of earlier, right? We're getting tagged by so many different things, and we have so many different rabbit holes we can go down. Aimlessly and without intention, but looking at things purposely, that's going to improve our lives, and therefore the thread into other people, and therefore the thread with the Ethernet cables with our very distant family and friends. We can do that as well too. But I'm constantly in an evolution, constantly, and that's the will to win. That's the will to win. You and I talked about business and things like that before. I could have given up and quit a lot of times along this last 2-3 years, but I didn't. I didn't at all, And we have to have that inner will when we don't want to, take the pause and take the day and whatever, but come back and have that will to win. But and for me, that's that resilient mindset. And that's, I attribute that more to our cultures than Eastern cultures. And I think that's a huge thing. That's a huge positive thing. So, and what that looks like on a daily basis, that's very different for all of us, So how we put that into play is very different for all of us, I know my will to win is, take care of this structure as best as I can. This spirit, this mind, this intellect, as well as this body, as best as I can, and then trickle that into as many people as I can affect. And it starts every day, every morning is my dog. That she gets cared for first. Period. Nothing happens without getting her cared for first. And then I move on to me, and then I move on to whoever else. So, but we got to show up for ourselves. If we don't do that, well, we're going to stay stuck in quicksand.
Mm-hmm.
Quicksand is below neutral, below neutral. And now we need help from others. And we can't even speak it out. And that's where a lot of people are.
Yeah.
So don't even tiptoe around the quicksand. Just get away from it. Move forward. Fly over it. However you got to do it. Just get out of there. That's not going to help us. Not going to help anybody. Look at the status of the world from a negative point of view, right? Look at the terror in the world that's going on right now from a negative point of view, right? The global circumstances, are these the leaders of the world? Really? Find a continent for me, Greg, would you? Find a country that has a so-called leader that I can look up to. There isn't one. We need to take that ownership.
Yeah.
We need to do that. So we have to figure this out because they're not by any means. They're failing their own citizens as well as each other's. So we need to take that ownership.
Yeah, we do. And it starts with each individual. No one's, and I think, chapter 1, no one's coming to save us. And, a big thing that I've realized, over the, past year or so, just kind of doing some internal work is that when somebody around you is continuously negative and you have to look to them as a leader, it makes you kind of want to need them more, I guess you could say, because they're saying everything's negative, but I have, potential path forward, but they stay in that negative sphere or mindset. So it makes people seek kind of, whether it's more negative, and that goes back to the chemistry project. Like if they're continuously, pumping you with that downer chemical, your body can only get so high up and then they bring it back down. So it's kind of that look to me as a leader and I'll control this and I'll give you these negative mindsets and continuously pump them into your mind so that, you need me to solve that negativity that I'm telling you about potentially. And a lot of what you're talking about from the resilience side is the proactive side of resilience, right? It's get out of the quicksand box. It's avoid it, walk around it, as opposed to waiting until you're in the sandbox, you're sinking down, and then you have to be reactive. And some people's definition of resilience is the ability to bounce back after something bad has happened. But I think a lot of the practices we've talked about today is really around, consciously building it so that when something comes up, you kind of, you bounce to the side of it or you walk around it because you've built those models, those internal resilience traits in order to navigate it in the right way for you. And if you don't believe you can do it, nobody's going to believe it. So it goes back to that.
That's right.
That winning mentality.
Exactly what you're saying is we have to fill that well so deep that nothing can shake that. But at the same time, we need self-awareness. We need to, I'll put it in your business terms, we need to pen test ourselves constantly. And for your prospective clients, you need to pen test themselves. We have to have that happen, Otherwise, a bigger trauma is going to show up, right? So we need the well fill, and we need to pen test ourselves, constantly.
Absolutely. And it's that constant evaluation, constant improvement, and constant movement, right? It's improvement mentally and then putting that into practice, through those numbers of ways that we've gone through today.
Yep.
And I think that's ultimately kind of connecting to that place we started with. And that's going to be different for everybody. We live in a world of kind of that, everybody talks about imposter syndrome. You have to model after, different types of people or one person that you really look up to, but nothing that they give you or tell you is really going to be the end all answer. It's that internal journey that is required to connect the different ideas, the different stories, the different strategies, the different tactics that people are using. And there's no destination. I think that's what some of us are all looking for.
Yes.
I've been there. I still get there at certain points throughout the day. We want that one destination where you're standing on the hill saying, yes, I did it. And, now I'm here and, what's next?
Right. right? I mean, we should be standing on that hill every single day and just keep on coming back to that hill or going to a new hill. But you're right, there is no destination. And if we're not, carving out the time to, do the introspection that you're talking about and having that self-awareness, then, we're going to continue to strive for, that dopamine high, right? But that hill we can create anytime we want and go upon it anytime we want, right? And it's traversing up along that path to get there. That's the fun of it all. What you see along the way and who you're with along the way and the conversations you're having. Yeah,
That's where the breakthroughs take place.
it is. Yeah.
So kind of wrapping all this together, one of the questions we like to ask is, are there 3 strategies that you would recommend to the audience to increase or enhance their connection? Whatever connection means to them. It could be life, could be business, could be the internet. Any kind of tactics you would suggest for the audience to put into practice when it comes to connection?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is track your habits. So, I mean, Atomic Habits, great book. Get a habit tracker. That's the first thing. And whether that's in an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF you print out, I mean, you can Google that so easily and find that, print it out, post it near your workspace, your play space, your kitchen, whatever it is. You could put that on your fridge and then track your habits, and have one for the different categories in your life. A big one for me, for example, is making connections with people I already know, right? I don't do that as often as I wish to. So that's a habit of mine that I'm moving forward so I can be more connected to the people that I care about. But the whole fitness, mindfulness, and meditation, conscious breath work, that's got to be there for us somewhere in some form, right? And then our nutritional capabilities. We should be constantly raising the bar of our own nutrition. Everyone's dehydrated, everyone's over medicated, everyone's over caffeined. I drink caffeine. I drink it a couple times a day, sometimes 3, depending on what I'm doing. It's not always coffee, but it could be in a drink too. So I'm not saying caffeine's bad, but how much water are we taking in? Just pure water, right? So we need to take our body weight, divide that number in half, and drink that much water in ounces every single day, or we're going to be not in a great shape here. So raise the bar of our nutrition. That's going to help our mental faculties. It's going to help everything we do for mindset. So that'll be the second thing. So track your habits, raise the bar of your nutrition, and then the most important thing is work with time blocks. There's a couple of models out there right now. Work for 50 minutes. Take a break for 10, whatever it is, right? Work for 20 minutes, take a break. Find a way inside a 2-4 hour period of your day to step away from whatever it is that you're doing in that moment. You could be lounging on the couch doing nothing for 3.5 hours. Stop doing that and go take care of yourself. Most of us have it in the frame. Well, we're in work mode. So, all right, well, 3 hours, 4 hours, stop, take a break, and do something for you, just you, or with your loved one. I'll walk my dog, right? So, but don't bring that phone with you. How we can get even close to peeling those layers away to get to that still space if we're bringing a device with us, right? It's not going to happen. So we want a time block, right? and figure out in a 2, 3, 4 hour window what I can get in as far as can I get a workout in? Can I do some yoga? Can I do some breathing? Can I sit down in stillness for 20 minutes? Yeah, you can. We need to have a why around it. So time block and make sure you have a why around it. Because without the why, we're not going to time block. So we have to put those two on the different ends of an infinite loop. Right? Time block, why? Time block, why? Time block, why? Or the time block says it's going to happen. So those are the 3 things I would suggest to the whole world right now. And if the leaders of our world were doing that, we wouldn't be in the situation we are in globally right now. So that's my stance on all of that.
Incredible, Eric. I love it. Definitely learned something new throughout this discussion.
Great.
Hopefully, everybody tuning in had a great experience, was able to adopt a new mindset, and really put some of those connection rituals, connection practices in place to really ultimately connect like we've never done before. I think that's that continuous improvement journey. How can folks, come in contact with you if they want to learn more about, these ideas that you embody and share with the world today?
Yeah, the simplest way is LinkedIn, and that's just easy as my name. So I made it real simple for LinkedIn people to find me. I don't have any offers or things that I'm doing right now on this end. Um, I'm planning to teach some conscious breath work here coming up pretty soon, so that'll be happening. I'll certainly post it on LinkedIn as well as Facebook. But that is the way to reach me and find me for sure. Oh, thank you. There it is. Yeah, there's the link. So that's super simple, right? And if anyone came to me with a need and, hey, can you help me out with this? Of course I would. We all need to calm down, and we all need to get a helping hand along with this too. So I'm happy to say yes to anybody who needs this.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely reach out to Eric. Always a pleasure to connect, Eric. Looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Pleasure.
And
Thank you.
until next time, my friend.
All right, sounds great. Have the best day.
Take care. You as
Thanks.
well.